Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm going to introduce myself once again. I did introduce myself in the morning when I was responding to one of the questions that had been raised. My name is Blessed Waiter. Blessed, doesn't matter what you say. And I am a principal auditor with the SABS, and my areas that I do assess are environmental management systems, occupational health and safety management systems, as well as energy management systems against the requirements of ISO 50001. As Peter has mentioned, there were some that were brave amongst us. The standard was already launched in March last year. So towards the end of the year, there were some organizations that felt that they could actually go for certification, or rather go for migration to 18001. In brief, this was the spectrum for those clients. So we've had to do stage 1 audits through to recertification audits. So it's been right across. At this stage, all clients were already certified to 9 and 14 for all the clients that we have done. There hasn't been an instance where we've done 45,001 and the client has not been certified to 9,001 and 14,001. And then there were those, of course, that were already also certified to OSHA's 18,001. So certainly for the stage 1, they didn't have a system in place for OSHA's 18,001. They had been developing the system, and when they had about 45,001, they decided they would not get certified to 18 first and then 45. They decided to go straight for 45,001. So that was quite brave and quite interesting as well. For these clients, they have managed to successfully transition to 2015 standards for all systems. I just felt this is important that we highlight this. Later on, when we look at some of the issues that came out, we'll probably come back and refer to this point here. For some of them, they did the transitions quite early, which was good. So these are organizations that perhaps felt as soon as the changes came, they wanted to be on board, and it's probably the reason why we see them going for certification first. The type of companies we're talking about, they've been very small. The smallest company had 17 employees. That went for 45,001 to date. And then I've said there to medium, 250 employees. Because I know amongst ourselves, some of us are coming from organizations where we have in excess of 2,000 employees. So that would be quite big. We haven't had any that's extremely big, but up to that. Then I've also put in there have been use of consultants in some cases. Please not, I have put it there, but we are not necessarily saying that you need to use a consultant. I've put it in there as part of the feedback of what we discovered or what we saw when we went for the audit. So that's a brief background of the organizations that have been audited to date. Now, coming to the gaps that have been identified, when you go through the standard, you will notice that there are some new policy commitments in the standard. Unfortunately, in quite a few instances, not all of the commitments are being met in the policies. For example, the policy commitment, which was not necessarily fully specified in 18,001 for providing safe and health working conditions for the prevention of work-related injury and health, elimination of hazards and reduction of risks as per clause 812. By and large, if it could be that your current occupational health and safety policy addresses all the requirements of the standard. But for most organizations, you will have to relocate those commitments because there are new things that have come in, and we expect to see as an organization that you make a commitment specifically to those. I've just given these as examples. There were more of some of the commitments that some organizations may have made. Also to highlight in this platform, sometimes part of the challenge is organizations want to play around with semantics If you can clearly say that the commitment is not coming out clearly, please let's try and do the right thing. We don't necessarily want to waste a lot of time with the auditors while we try and argue that no, it is implied in this particular statement here. I think the standard has been written in a very clear way. So let's also just try and make sure that our own management system is also clear, and that saves a lot of auditing time so that we can give you value. We then focus on more important areas of your management system and we can add value. Now, the next one deals with consultation and participation of workers. And here, I'm just going to quickly run through the new requirement in terms of what the standard now says. We'll touch a little bit on what OSHA 17001 currently says with regards to participation and consultation. For those of you who would have attended training, perhaps you would have seen that this element here, we may say set here in the OSHA 17001 standard, but it has been elevated right to the top. And at the end of this discussion, we're going to discuss briefly why consultation and participation is now such a big issue in the standard. Belinda touched on that as well in her presentations. So consultation and participation is found in clause 5.4 of the standard, and it requires you as an organization to establish processes for the consultation and participation of workers at applicable levels and functions of the organization. One thing that's coming through is if you do have workers' representatives or worker organizations within your organization, then your processes that you establish must also take into account those worker representative forums that you have within the organization. Further on, I'm not looking at all the requirements. In the D part of this clause, it requires that the organization establishes or emphasizes the consultation of non-managerial workers, and it highlights a total of 9 areas in this particular instance. So there are 9 areas where workers have to be consulted, and if you have worker organizations, then you have to take them into account. If we go to the E part of the standard with regards now to participation, and please note these are shalls, so you don't have a choice here as an organization. You cannot say we'll do it or we can't do it. In those 9 areas, we expect to see that workers are actually being consulted. Shall, mandatory requirement from the standard. In E, with regards to participation, it talks of that the participation of non-managerial workers in a total of 7 highlighted areas. Now, I do have a question here. How many areas does the OSHA's 18001 standard require participation of workers, the current one? Who remembers? Okay. It's actually 5. I had a 6. Yes, the 6th one is actually more on a consultation. Yes, so very close. That's actually a correct answer. So 5 areas with regards to participation, and then of course it talks about consultation. But if you look at what we're saying here, now with regards to consultation, 9 areas. With regards to participation, 7 areas, and these are minimum. As an organization, you may actually do over and above this. What it actually means is when we start with the standard, because worker consultation and worker participation, we actually find it in clause 4 of the standard. So it's not sitting in 5.4, it's been built right across the entire standard. So when we start with the context of the organization, there are issues with regards to workers being consulted, right up until we get to the improvement part of the standard. So it's been a huge change that has come into the standard. And perhaps maybe the questions need to be asked with regards to what is consultation, what is participation. This is not a new term in the standard. Is there anyone who thinks it's not an exam, but maybe we can give it a try. What is consultation? From an occupational health and safety management system perspective. Okay, there are no takers. Okay, participation? Still no takers. The reason why we're focusing on this is there is still a lot of confusion even to date in OSHA 18001. If you look at participation and consultation, it comes in clause 443 of the standard. And 443 is subdivided into 2. 443 1, which is on communication, and 2, which is on participation and consultation. There is a difference between communication and consultation and participation. Please take note of that. So even if you're not being audited on 45,001 this year, those issues within your 18,001 management system for occupational health and safety should still be right. Well, the easiest thing is to refer to the definitions. The standard has definitions for this. Definition 3.4 and definition 3.5 of the standard does clarify what is consultation and what is participation. And I thought perhaps for the purpose of our discussion, we can briefly have a look at the definitions. Participation says involvement in decision making. Now, if you come up with an occupational health and safety policy and you go and present it to your workers, your workers have not participated in the occupational health and safety policy. You are communicating it to them. They should be involved in the actual decision of how that occupational health and safety policy is going to look like. That's what the definition is saying. They should be involved in the decision. So when you go through the standard, you're going to see a lot of areas where the standard now says workers and worker representatives or worker organizations need to be involved with regards to participation. They need to participate. So what it's saying here is they need to be involved in the decision making. If you give documented information to the assessors, to the audit teams, which seems to suggest that they were only involved after the decisions were made, unfortunately, you're not meeting the requirements. Consultation, seeking views before making a decision. So we consult the workers. Before we have made any decisions, your documented evidence must prove that this did actually take place before the decision was made. That's what the standard is saying. This is not an SABS definition. As Belinda has said, this is an ISO definition. So it is the standard definition that's going to be expected. And there is a note to entries for both definitions, which says that it includes engaging health and safety committees and worker representatives where they exist, which is what I've just been alluding. This is coming straight from the standard. In the standard, the notes are provided after each definition. Here I've just provided the note as one. Now, what were the challenges that we seemed to... This was the biggest challenge that we saw from the audits that we conducted. Either there were no processes established for the consultation and participation of workers, and some of them may have guessed right, specifically for the stage 1 audit, because they didn't have an occupational health and safety system in place in the first place. So this is something new that they are going to have to engage in. What about an organization that has got 17 employees? Do they need to have a health and safety committee? Well, from the Act's perspective, not necessarily, isn't it? But now, from the standards perspective, worker participation, worker consultation is a mandatory thing. So an organization may have thought, well, not necessarily, we don't need to have it. But from the standard perspective, this is an expectation. Although in some instances, those requirements from clause 5.4 have not been largely met in most of the new areas. Now remember, we spoke about the 5, 9, 7 areas. So what it's saying is there are certain new areas in which workers are now required to be consulted. Workers are now required to participate in your organization's occupational health and safety system. And if we come and audit you and nothing has changed from the participation and consultative arrangements that you had as an organization when you were certified for OSHA's 18001, then it is indeed a gap that's going to be identified. You can rest assured that there is something that needs to change. Once again, the focus of 45,001 is, I have mentioned, we're going to discuss that with regards to why this has become such a big issue in the standard. We'll briefly talk about that. Now, the C part of the standard says you must determine and remove obstacles or barriers to participation. And if you can't do that, then the standard requires you to minimize. Frequently, for some organizations, they will tell you, well, our health and safety committee doesn't function. Why? No, people are not interested in attending the meetings. The standard now requires you to actually do something about it. So that's a barrier to participation, right? So as an organization, what is it that you are doing? How are you going to remove the barrier? How are you going to minimize it? So if there are any barriers to participation in consultation, you have, as an organization, to take care of that. Unfortunately, what we saw was organizations seem not to have really paid particular attention to this. So they may have barriers, but it doesn't look like they are doing anything to remove the barriers, or they are trying to minimize them. Some organizations may then say, well, but we do not have any barriers. Well, your documented information or your management system must be able to demonstrate that you at least engaged in an effort to determine these obstacles. Sometimes it is stated that no, there are no obstacles, but once you start going through the management system, you can clearly see where the obstacles are. So highlighting therefore the fact that the organization has not done justice to its management system with regards to this particular element. As I have mentioned, issues regarding to participation and consultation, that's the reason why we felt that it would probably be best for us to first of all look at the requirements, and in other words, the expectations, a huge requirement, and this has been one of the ones mostly not met by organizations. This is not a training session, but hopefully it has clarified certain things for you going forward. There were other common issues here. We've grouped the common ones, and they are mainly to do with the fact that certain elements of the management system may not have been implemented at all, or may not have been fully implemented. So which elements are we referring to here in this particular instance? This information that I'm sharing with you now is also based on our experiences from when we did the migrations from 9,000 and 14,001 as well. The most common one, internal audits not conducted against the new requirements. This is a very common one, that both from in ISO 45001 audits that we've already conducted, and for 14 and 9, we also saw that there was an issue. If we were to go through and do a trend of non-conformances that we raised with regards to this, there were quite a few. Please note, Peter spoke about a gap analysis for your organization. Remember those IAF guidelines, where IAF said from MD21, they said as an organization, please, you must do an internal gap analysis to see what's the status quo and where do you need to be. That gap analysis is not accepted as an internal audit. It is an internal reflection for you as an organization to see the areas where you need to focus on. And yeah, I'm making reference to that IAF presentation that was done by Peter. As an organization, for you to say you fully conform to the requirements of ISO 45001, you need to internally audit yourselves. Remember the PDCA cycle? So the check part of it, you need to have fully implemented that check part. And when we come through, we are evaluating to see whether all phases of the PDCA cycle have actually been implemented by the organization. Another common one is management reviews not conducted in line with new requirements. Once again, as an organization, you need to have done a review of your own management. So when we come, we look at the effectiveness of those processes as third-party assessors. And analysis and performance evaluation. So Belinda touched on this and mentioned that it's not necessarily a new requirement, but perhaps it's now much more pronounced in 45,001. And amongst yourselves, colleagues, I can tell you now, there are organizations that we know where analysis of data has always happened. There are organizations where we know performance evaluations with regards to the occupational health and safety management system have always taken place. Interestingly, in one organization, when they had a particular issue with regards to incident, a certain particular incident that kept recurring, they went back as far as 35 years of data to try and see what it is exactly that was happening. And when they did that, they could actually pinpoint the root cause of where their issues were coming from. So yours may not necessarily be that in-depth, but to a certain extent, you need to prove, you need to demonstrate that you are analyzing the data that comes from an occupational health and safety management system, and you are evaluating the performance of your management system. Please note, when we come through, all elements of the management system should have been fully implemented. These are some of the common ones where we tend to see organizations not having fully implemented. From time to time, we do get other sections of the standard as well not fully implemented or not implemented at all by certain organizations. Now, please remember, our role as a certification body is to verify the effective implementation of your management system. We're not there to try and advise, as Peter has mentioned, and there tend to be reasons given, and we just thought perhaps we would share with you some of the reasons that we got from some of the organizations. Sometimes the audit cannot be done because the training for 45,001 was done late. So if you look at the implementation or the migration plan for the organization, it so happened that by the time the certification audit is coming, they haven't had time to do the internal audit. Unfortunately, not acceptable. How are you going to demonstrate that the internal audit function is actually effective for the organization? It may be a valid reasons. Colleagues, I'm not saying these reasons are not valid. They may be valid reasons to the organization, but the question is, are they acceptable to a third-party certification body? Unfortunately not. We cannot write in our audit report that you have not conducted internal audits against the new requirements and still go on and give a positive recommendation for your certification. If our accreditation bodies come here, they will have a heart attack and we immediately lose our accreditation. There is a thought also, we are in the process of transitioning. This is one that comes through, and I've put a double question mark on this one here because I don't quite understand what this means. But I'll try and explain it to you from the client's perspective. So they are saying here, we have been implementing these things and we are still in the process of doing it. Hence, we have not done certain things. Please note, when you ask the SABS to come and do the migration audit, Peter alluded to the fact that we can do it at any phase of your cycle, whether during a surveillance 1, surveillance 2, or a recertification audit. You should have transitioned as an organization. There's only one exception. If we are going to do the audit in phases, as phase 1 and phase 2, yes. Now, depending on how the approach will be, in some instances it might be that the phase 1 audit is more of a stage 1 audit. Then in that particular instance, you may not have fully implemented certain requirements, but at least you can demonstrate how you are going to meet them. But if at the end of that audit, we need to make a recommendation to say the organization conforms to the requirements of ISO 45001, you cannot tell us that you're in the process of transition. Internally, as an organization, you need to have transitioned. Yes, other transition requirements from the external side, from the third party side, from our side, in terms of us conducting your audit, you responding to with corrective actions to any issues we may have highlighted, as well as us then taking through your file through our accreditation department for a decision to be made in terms of your certification. Yes, that there is still some transitioning happening, but that's external. Internally as an organization, you need to have done. Then there's also this one here. We were waiting for this audit. Yes, you can wait for audit, but after fully implementing your migration plan. Don't wait for it. Because remember, we're not there to come and advise you. We're there to come and verify the effectiveness of your management system or requirements. You saw the International Accreditation Forum, IAF, through MD22 did communicate that there is at least a mandate that has to be added for all audits, migration audits to ISO 45001. The reason is because we need to do an effective evaluation of the entire system itself. And Peter explained this well in the morning and said, one audit a day is the minimum, depending on the amount of risks, depending on the nature of organization. And we also look at your previous performance as well. That time may actually be increased from one audit a day. As I have highlighted, as a certification body, we verify the effective implementation of the requirements within your organization. with regards to that, I just thought perhaps maybe it's a very good point that we share with you what ISO 17021 says. So ISO 17021 is the international standard that specifies requirements for us as a certification body. That's the standard to which we are actually accredited by our accreditation bodies. So it is a management system for certification bodies. And it says, certification of a management system provides an independent demonstration that the management system of the organization, number one, conforms to specified requirements. Number two, is capable of consistently achieving the policy and objectives. And lastly, is effectively implemented. So this is our mandate as a certification board. This is what's expected of us as conformity assessors. So because of this, we have to demonstrate this independence. We cannot come there, and Peter spoke about us not being able to do a gap analysis. We cannot come there and you say you were waiting for us, maybe to put you in the right direction, or you were waiting to then work on the outcome of our findings from the audit. We are doing an independent verification that whatever is said in the standard has been effectively implemented by you. And it says there that your system must be conforming to the specified requirements. So if you have not implemented a certain part of the standard, can we say the system is conforming to specified requirements? Unfortunately, the answer is no. If you have not implemented a certain section of the standard, how confident are you that the system is capable of consistently achieving the intended outcomes of the standard? Belinda spoke to you about intended outcomes. It's a pity that there's no definition in the standard, but the standard talks a lot about intended outcomes. So if one part of your system has not been fully implemented, are you able to actually achieve the intended outcomes? Unfortunately, the answer is a no. And once again, can we say the system has been effectively implemented? Certainly, we won't be able to do that. So this just gives you a perspective with regards to why, when we come and we haven't implemented certain things, then we tell you, well, unfortunately, it's going to be non-conformity. For the major requirements, if you haven't done an audit, if you have not evaluated your management system or reviewed your management system in line with the new requirement, unfortunately, the auditors have to raise that as major non-conformances. This is a discussion that has been held during this week when we were having our intensive auditor calibration. So if you have not done an audit and our audit comes along, well, unfortunately, it's a major non-conformity. But if we can see that there are major requirements that you are consistently not meeting, you said you were ready, but you are actually not ready, the auditors can actually decide to then stop the audit and actually ask that we redo the audit. Because sometimes it has happened, certain organizations are not ready and they ask us to come. And the intention is, well, after they have audited, we will clear the non-conformities. And in clearing the non-conformities, we are implementing the system. Unfortunately, it does not work like that. If it's very clear to the team that there is not much that the organization has done, they will decide to abort the audit and decide that we schedule the migration audit for the organization. Now, let's discuss a little bit about why the issues regarding workers is now quite pronounced in the standards. And in the ISO 45001 standard. So firstly, if you look at the introduction to the standard, it talks about the organization being responsible for the occupational health and safety of workers and others. So for this particular standard, the focus really is on workers and others who have access to your workplace. So that's where it centers. Now, if you were to establish an occupational health and safety management system, that does not involve the workers, that does not involve others who perform certain functions on your site. Now the question is, how does that actually take place? Because the system is central to the workers. We are trying to protect the workers, and they are the people who are exposed to the hazards, and they are the people we are trying to protect, to save, to ensure that they go back home at the end of each day. You saw the statistics that Belinda shared with us, 6,300 occupational health and safety related fatalities, in excess of 2.2 million fatalities per annum. Those are huge numbers. organizations need to pay attention to this. So this is in the introduction to the standard. If you have a copy of the standard, if you go to the introduction part, you will be able to see that. The document that Peter spent a bit of time this morning discussing, MD22, in Article 9.4.7.1, it speaks about management legally responsible for the health and safety being invited to the closing meeting, personnel responsible for monitoring employees' health, and also employee representatives being invited to the closing. What this highlights is that focus on the worker, because that's what the system is all about. So now they're saying, okay, all the relevant people need to actually know the outcome of the audit coming from that mandatory document. And colleagues, MD documents if one wants to look at them, you can actually just go onto the IF website, and they are available actually to download for free, and you can have a look at them for yourself in terms of these requirements. One other thing is that MD22, in its introduction, please take note, it speaks to the fact that it is a mandatory document, as we have already highlighted. And there towards the bottom, where I've also highlighted in red, it says this document, interestingly, they said not only applies for certification to OSHAs. I actually thought they would say not only applies to certification to ISO 45001, but also to OSHAs. It says not only applies to OSHAs, but also to any other management systems. And it said there, for example, the upcoming 45001. The reason is MD22 was released in January last year. ISO 45000 was only published in March. So MD22 had already been released. And this requirement here to invite these people in your closing meeting is also applicable to organizations that are certified to OSHA's 18001 going forward. So when we come for your next OSHA's audit, if you are not ready for migration, these people have to be invited to the closing meeting. I'm not too sure if the question was asked earlier on with regards to, okay, I think the question was, is it also applicable to 14001? Well, this has been said for occupational health and safety system. And other questions that we've also come across while we're conducting the 45001 audits were, what about the opening meeting? The document specifically says closing meeting. If as an organization you feel you also want to invite these people to your opening meeting, well, that's up to you. But with regards to the closing meeting, we need to see them. And as Peter has highlighted, if that cannot be demonstrated that there is some seriousness with regards to this, major non-conformity can be raised, and you can actually be recommended for suspension because of this.
Can that be one person, or does it have to be 3 people?
Okay, can I throw it to the floor? So let's quickly go through it first, and then we can see if we can get an answer. It says, the representative should invite management legally responsible for occupational health and safety, personnel responsible for monitoring employees' health. What are we typically talking about here? Occupational health personnel, isn't it? And then it says employees' representatives. What do we think with regards to the question? It's a very valid question. Nolwazi? And Belinda?
Okay. If the company is not large enough to occupy 3 people?
Okay. So I think we'll take it on a case by case. Okay, sorry, was that another end? Yes, ma'am.
By virtue of the categories, you already have those people. The employee representative, I think it will be the she-rep.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Yes, Stembile? Okay. Sorry, Stembile, we'll come to you just now. Let's go to, is it? Yep. There was something. Yes.
What if we don't have a doctor who works on our premises?
Okay, we're going to come to that. And then Stembile, let's hear from Stembile here.
Thanks, I think it has been, I'm speaking from my organization, it has been something that has been done. Now to demonstrate, say, on your attendance register, it has to come out loud. To say this is an occupational medicine practitioner, and then responsible for the health, or these are the sisters, and then the title has to come out loud. And then the she reps or the union chairperson or the president or the one who is responsible for the site, it has to come out loud.
Thank you. So, if you remember, our attendance register does ask for the position of the incumbent who would have put their name down. Sometimes what happens is organizations, everyone, if it's organization XYZ, instead of putting in their position, then they write their name and XYZ and sign under the opening meeting. It's going to be difficult for us to prove to our accreditation bodies that indeed we actually met the requirements, isn't it? So hence we ask for the position. I think there's another comment.
Comment under personnel responsible for monitoring employees' health. Would an occupational hygiene person fulfill this role? If, let's say, we don't have people from the medical center, would we say that the occupational hygiene people are actually monitoring the employees' health?
Okay, so whoever is responsible for monitoring employees' health, and obviously here we're not saying everyone, isn't it? So they will have to be represented. Okay, so once again, if we do have a medical practitioner on site, then definitely yes, they have to. If we do not have a medical practitioner on site, then obviously that's something that we will take into account. Remember, here it says justification in case of absence shall be recorded. Well, this is a small organization, and this particular, as a result, employees who are responsible for monitoring, it's an outsourced function or something like that. That will go in there. It was mentioned, what if it's such a small organization? Well, if there is one person who is fulfilling the roles of all three roles, yes, then we're happy with that. Once again, we go back to the 80-20 principle. In 80% of the cases, perhaps maybe this time around we need to up it to 90% of the times, there will be at least 3 different people in the organization who will be fulfilling these roles. It sometimes becomes quite cumbersome for any one person just to be, it's almost impractical. But perhaps maybe because of the size of the organization, yes, it could be that we've been to organizations where the occupational health personnel are very conversant in the management system of the organization. You literally audit them when you're auditing the management system. So if that's the case, then acceptable. So no hard and fast rules. If you have a situation in the opening meeting, let's discuss it, and then we can see the way forward. Yes, Luis?
Surely the person responsible, legally responsible for health and safety. That's non-negotiable.
Thank you. Yes. And Stembile?
You know, I just want to draw a distinction. Since we say ISO 45001,
Yes.
and then company X, Y, and Z has met all the requirements. Like this clause is not really the closing and opening, is not part of, 45,001. Will it come out loud when you say, X, Y, and Z have satisfied all the requirements of ISO 45001, 18,000. However, as per IAF, we cannot, dish out or, issue certification because of this particular clause, or it will come out as revoke, you don't meet the standard requirement. Because I'm looking holistically, the closing and opening is really not ISO 45001.
Okay, but remember, as we have highlighted, and a lot of you sitting here today place a lot of value in an accredited certificate. So a requirement like this has a huge impact on our accreditation. If we cannot, and this is a discussion that we've already had with the Dutch Accreditation Council, RVA, who have accredited us for 18,001. When they came through for their audit in 2018, we already discussed this. When they went to witness us at one of the organizations that we have certified, they were also quite interested in finding out what it. So this is a mandatory document. So remember the standard talks of legal and other requirements. Is the SABS contract, can we raise a finding against you not conforming to the SABS contract? It is part of your other requirements, isn't it? So these are becoming other requirements that you, colleagues, it's not a difficult aspect to fulfill. I'm sure we can all agree, isn't it? Unless if there are some serious challenges within the organization. Interestingly now, ISO 45001 speaks of the culture, the occupational health and safety culture within the organization, which is an interesting thing. Yes, if the organization is not very serious about its occupational health and safety, it can be a challenge for them to have these people present. But if we are serious about it, it can be done. It's not really too difficult, I think. I'm not dismissing your point, Stembile. But yes, if we can demonstrate that if there are no valid reasons why this cannot happen, we are obliged to raise non-conformances against the organization. Because if we don't do it, we will lose our accreditation. And when we lose our accreditation, it affects not only your organization, but everyone else sitting here and others who fail to attend. There are huge consequences for this. Okay. Those were actually my final 2 slides, and it looks like that's where most of the questions came from. I don't know, are there any further questions, any further comments on this feedback? We know it's very brief, but we thought rather than sit here and labor through each and every single item that organizations could not meet, perhaps we could group some of them into what was common. Yes, I think it's...
In terms of your internal auditing, if I have 6 different departments, do I have to audit them within a single year, or can I determine my own programming and move into the second year? ISO doesn't actually tell you exactly how many times to audit, but it does for the program.
Okay. Are there any takers on this? Any views on this? Because this is an interesting one. Okay, please, with the mic, maybe you can repeat the question with the mic. Yes.
Sorry, I'm asking the difference between when we have a look at internal audit. So the point of being, it doesn't actually, ISO doesn't tell you how many times to audit or when. It only requires a programming. So if I have 6 different departments, can I audit 3 departments and then the 3 next year within the different systems? As long as I put down the programming that I will audit them.
Okay, what's our take on this? Yes, we have a hand.
It's where your risk base, so which department is your high risk, and where your internal audit procedure.
Does that still allow me to do 3 one year and 3 next year? As long as I've got it down in my program.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what that says. It's what he says when I come in.
What matters is whether or not we're meeting the requirements. There is a hand at the back. Peter, before we go to Belinda, there is a hand at the back.
Okay, I wanted to say the standard says, it doesn't really say how often you should go. You decide on the frequency of your audit, why you're going to audit, and which process or which department you audit is based on you look at where you have more issues. And that's how you will decide. I'm going to audit this department and that other one this year. The following year you choose whatever. You use your risk base, look at your risk base based on where you have issues, where you have more incidents, where you have more problems.
Okay, there is another view. Belinda, you wanted to make a point. The answer actually lies in one of my previous slides.
Luckily, I'm from training, so I can be a bit more speaking out loud with my colleagues. And when I train, I always I speak out loud that give and take minimum a year, but if there's mirror images and then the risk, I think will come into factor now. So if there's a duplication, mirror image, other risks. But a rule of thumb, I would have said, if this was a training center, training session, I would have said at least once.
Okay, there is a few. Mishek?
That is good practice.
No doubt about it, I understand what you're saying, but again, like the other one I have different auditors have no situations to say that you haven't audited all your departments. People ask them over it, tell me to do that, programming says I'm doing that one, go right.
Okay, we're going to touch on that. Yes, Mishek?
Yeah, so I think I do go in line with what Belinda is saying. It's important to look at the applicability. So if you are auditing, let's say it's certification first time, the auditor is coming for the first time. Surely you must be auditing all departments. But after some time, you might decide, maybe one of the standards say you need to look at past performance. So you've been auditing these guys every month, and there is no findings. Everything is working well. Then you kind of increase the frequency. So as long as there is a backup justification, there is a reasonable reasons why we are doing it that way, it should be acceptable as long as you are following your program and there is sufficient reasons. However, if there is a high risk area that you audit once in 5 years, then there's a problem with that. And the auditor can still give you a finding even though you have got that program. It will be an ineffective program.
Thank you, Mishek. So there are a number of factors to consider here. When you go through ISO 45001, one thing that you will notice is it's risk-based. Peter spoke in the morning about how certain organizations that in MD5 that we used previously, the mandatory document 5 for classification of companies, we all know the classifications, how those organizations have been reclassified in MD22 from either a low classification to a medium or from a medium to a high. The reason, risk-based. So if you have your program that wants to audit a department in the future, and the audit team, when they leave, must make a recommendation as to the effectiveness of your management system. And this is an extremely risk area. Do we have the confidence that the requirements are being fully met? We're talking about workers, these are workers in that particular area. Have we fully addressed the requirements? As an organization, do we have the confidence? Will the audit team be able to have the confidence? So the issues regarding risk, quite of importance. As a matter of fact, going forward, if you are a multi-site certification, and some of your sites are much more riskier than others, we are actually required to, in terms of our sampling, look at the level of risk for those sites. If you are an organization, we may not necessarily audit all your processes in an audit, but if it can be shown that there are certain risks on certain processes that are different from the rest of the organization and the level is quite high, as a certification board we have to demonstrate that we are actually auditing constantly those areas, and the same principles must be applied internally as well for you. So one of the things that you would need to look at is risk. As Mishek has said, and I like Mishek, I know him, he's a colleague of mine. He is an auditor from another certification. He used to be an auditor from another certification board before he went where he is. So some of the things that he's saying here, he's also bringing in experiences from certification, not necessarily an SABS view. So with initial certification, what's the expectation? We need to have audited. Now, bear in mind the other point is, when an auditor goes to audit a certain process, they are allowed to audit across the entire spectrum of the standard. Am I right? Yes. So if I go into a particular process area in a migration audit and want to see how internal audit requirements have been implemented, what happens? And you have not audited this particular department. Have the requirements of the standard been met in that particular department or not? How do I conclude as a certification auditor, as a third-party auditor? So all of this is information. Now, there are various new requirements in the standard. So the question is, besides internal audit, what else in this particular department have you not implemented? Because the requirements of this standard, or for 45,000, should have been implemented right across your entire organization. Do you see how this could raise quite a few questions that you may not be able to answer at the time of the audit if you do not really look at it closely, and could actually result in problems? We know going forward, once the new requirements have been assessed, yes, we can talk about, well, yeah, indeed, yes, there is less risk since we are looking at this process at this particular frequency and. I don't know if it's clear.
Next time when you come and audit me, I'm going to ask you, can I have three? You must laugh now.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
He's supporting you.
Okay.
So when you come and audit me next time,
Any other points? Any further comments? Any viewpoints? In conclusion, colleagues, I would just want to say it is a very interesting standard. If you have a passion for occupational health and safety management systems, like I know most of you do, it is a very, very interesting standard. The requirements have been enhanced, not with a view to try and make it difficult for you as occupational health and safety practitioners, but to actually try and make your work easy. So to try and ensure that there's more buy-in from the organization, right across from the workers to top management. And if that buy-in is there, if the correct culture is established in the organization, it will be a pleasure for you to actually manage the management system for your organization for occupational health and safety management. If there are no further questions, once again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.